Thank you for attending today's meeting of the and as for information for our audience, if you are not satisfied with a decision made by the Metropolitan Board of Fair Commissioners today, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of cert with the Davidson County Chancery of Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of entry of the board's decision. And to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met, please be advised that you should contact your own independent legal counsel. My name is Jasper Hendricks, and I am calling this meeting to order at 4:05 p.m. And our first order of business will be approval of the minutes from the previous meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Yep.
Yep. Aye. Aye.
And aye. Next will be a public comment period. Are there any residents that did not get a chance to sign up, or any attendees not get a chance to sign up to participate in public comment period that would like to speak at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll move forward. Next order of business will be a financial update.
Happy New Year. The financial information presented today is preliminary, and our revenues and expenses for December 2023 may not have been recorded to the ledgers as of January 9th, 2024, when this report was created. The preliminary actuals for December 2023 are as follows. Revenue is $1.9 million. Expenditures are around $2.3 million, resulting in a net loss of approximately $464,150. Depreciation expense is $310,000, so the total net loss is roughly $774,746. Below you will find an itemized list of our revenues and expenses. Our top revenue sources include flea market, corporate sales events, and the divisional fair. Flea market revenue is roughly $540,000, which represents 28% of the revenue. Corporate sales is around $576,000, which represents 30%. Divisional fair is $677,000, which represents 36% of the total revenue. Our top three expenses include payroll, utilities, and purchased services. Our payroll expense is approximately $877,000, which represents 37% of our total expenses. Utilities is roughly $225,000, which is 9%. Purchased services is $562,000, which is about 24%. For the month of January, our revenue projection is approximately $383,000, and our expense projection is about $483,000, which the net loss of that is about $99,586. On the agent report, we have approximately $11,452 in outstanding invoices. All of the promoters have been contacted and invoiced. Overall, we are tracking to be within budget for this fiscal year. This concludes the financial report. Are there any questions?
Yes, Commissioner Hartley.
Thank you so much for this report. As always, super informative. I hate that I can never remember this, but can you remind me what our fiscal year is?
July 1st through June 30th.
Do you mind just writing that on this report?
Sure.
So I can remember it, so I don't forget every year. And the reason I ask is I'm trying to remember where we are in the cycle. So this is
6
essentially
months.
halfway.
Yeah.
And as you're halfway through the year, I know you said we're tracking the budget. Are there any, and this could be for you, Laura or Satrice, are there any revenue elements that you think are trending negatively? And what I mean is, like, are we good towards budget across the board, or are there any things that are kind of overperforming or underperforming?
Our revenue for track is underperforming. We have budgeted $63,600 for, well, no, that's at 51%. We're good there. The only one that I would say is slightly underperforming is corporate sales events. We budgeted $1.4 million. We've collected $576,000. That's 40%, rather than 50%. Everything else is pretty much at 50% or more in collections. The contracts here show $30,500. The budget is $220,000. We just got the the ground lease payment of $168,000, I believe. So that's going to show up for next month. So everything else is tracking except corporate sales events.
I will add one thing on the corporate sales too, is that some of that is timing, because we've got a lot of events coming up first quarter calendar year, and December is typically one of our slowest months.
Sorry, but and my question then would be, I mean, looking forward at the schedule, do you think we're going to be able to make that up? And, you know, by what we have on the books, or do we need to, will there be any effort to maybe reach out and try to get more corporate sales, or try to figure out how to make that up?
At this point, looking at the calendar, I'm not concerned. And yes, I do think we're going to make that up, because we still continue to book. I mean, I had somebody reach out to me again today looking for space. So it's just capacity. But yeah, we're adding people and adding events frequently that are not represented in our original projections because they're new.
So my last question is, and thank you for that, and that was going to be my exact question, Commissioner Hendricks, so thank you for that. So, I mean, to me, this reads like you are performing to plan. Laura, you and your team are performing to plan, and what we need to continue to always keep our eye on is how can we drive down the 1.4 million in sort of stipend, and how can we sort of drive that down. And I know we have a plan for that. There's no criticism here, just sort of keeping that ball in mind that you're executing on the budget you've set. And so now how can we sort of shrink that gap through different funding sources?
And I just have a question too. My question would be, have we begun to take a look at corporate sponsorships in addition to corporate sales?
We have, and at this point, a lot of it is fair related. One of the strategies we've been looking at is to increase through action of Metro Council. First, obviously, we would come to this board, but to increase the level at which we can accept donations, gifts, grants, up to, I think right now, what is it, $7,500. What we would do is something similar that Metro Parks has done, and they've increased that level up to 25. So it would make it a lot easier for us to go out and seek a little bit larger sponsorships, because then we wouldn't have to go to council every time we're over $7,500.
So has that, but where are we with that? Because I think we've been talking about that for the last few months.
I'm sorry, that is something Ms. Haber has been working on, and she's not here today. So I will look into it and follow up with an update for you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the commissioners?
I mean, just to your point, Jasper, like, I wonder if we can we give any kind of like preliminary, like, I think that's a great idea and I don't even want to talk about it. Like, can we just go ahead and give you approval to go forward with that? Like, so I don't want you to wait a month to get back to us.
I think you would want to like review the draft ordinance once it's prepared so that you know that what you're actually recommending to council.
Okay, well, let's aim for it next month then.
Commissioner Owens, any questions? No, sir. All right. You good? All right. Thank you, Mr. Chase. Thank you. The next item will be events update from our campus partners. Let's start with Nashville Soccer.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Happy New Year. I actually don't have a formal update prepared for you because we've been on the off season. So our preseason starts next week. The folks are flying down to Tampa or Florida, I think it might be Sunday. And then our season officially kicks off on February 25th at home against Philly at 4 o'clock. So hopefully some folks will be there, but that's really it on the soccer side. Happy to answer any questions. All right.
Thank you. Let's see. What is it? Dirk is here. Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, sorry.
I was hiding behind the podium. Good evening, commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to give a quick update about the mixed-use project. The building right now, as you can see, is getting really close on exterior finishes. Our balconies and siding are about 95% complete. We've got final paint installed now on the south, east, and west facades, and we'll be working around to the Benton Avenue facade, the north facade next. So don't worry, the building will not be yellow. So final paint has to be installed there. The elevators are now functional in the building. We're being used by the interior crews doing all the finish work. The unit finishes continue to be installed on levels 4 and 5. That involves mostly kitchens, bathrooms, trim, and flooring at this point, and the finishes are terrific. Can't wait for the spring when the weather gets a little bit warmer to show you all what's going on inside the building. That'll be fun to take you for a little tour. The parking garage, as you know, is substantially complete. We now have power to the garage, which is great. The date for vehicular access for events is really going to be determined at this point by the completion of Speedway Alley and the improvements that we're doing there as part of our participation agreement with Metro. We know that it'll be ready for the first race on, I believe, April 7th. We're trying to figure out whether it can be made available earlier for the first soccer match on February 25th and the soccer matches that will be occurring in the month of March. So that's a little bit up in the air right now, but we're working on that, and we'll work with our campus partners to make that garage available as soon as possible. The Fair Plaza work that's happening in front of the building on Benton Avenue will be starting in March and will be complete with the delivery of the building this summer. The good news is, as part of that participation agreement, so far our contract working drawings have been priced and within budget, which is terrific. So we're looking forward to that because that's going to be a very nice community amenity for our neighbors. In addition, we've got site concrete features being installed around the perimeter of the building. That includes retaining walls, sidewalks, and stairs, and so that work will be ongoing for the next couple months. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Dirk, when do you have residents moving in?
July.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you. So our next would be, I'm going to say Bob for later. Okay. All right, Bob.
Either that or you can have them go now.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. I too, it's off season for us, so not a lot to report. We're getting our rules and specifications done. I've given you the preliminary schedule. I think we have a vote tonight on that Thursday race there. It says tentative. So again, this is my opportunity to show you that first before we release it to the public. Our racers and fans are clamoring for it. So we'll get through today and then hopefully release it. But that's really all I have right now. Some updates. We will be having a new general manager, and I'll introduce you to him when he gets moved here. Scott Minland will stay on board also to help. So not a big change there, just some extra help. We plan on doing a lot more community, and as we've talked about, a lot more engagement here for next year.
Thank you, Bob. And as far as my question would be, at the last meeting, we discussed some work that potentially may need some improvements. Have there been any discussions about that?
I sent you an email. Did you get that?
When did you send it?
Back then. It's been a month ago.
Oh, no. We already talked about, I'm talking about from the last meeting. We discussed, I think you were going to get together to discuss which of those line items needed to be, that you thought needed to, take priority.
Apologize. I was going to get with Laura and her staff. You're correct, and we have not done that yet.
Okay.
Laura, we need to schedule that, Laura. I'm sorry. Yep.
All right.
That was the hold up there. I want to get with her staff to see what can be done in-house.
Yeah, or like because I think the discussion was on what was necessary as far as like safety and ADA and, and all that, the things that needed to be done that we needed to take a look at because where are we with the budget? Because our budget has to be submitted for next year, for next fiscal, but we need to start looking at numbers now.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, again, I think my thought process was give Laura and her staff to work with them closely on that. I guess overall, I don't know if anything's really outstanding that needs to be done. Most of them are capital improvements. So, but let me get a little more drawn down with Laura and her staff on that.
Yeah, and I'm working on some of the things that are bigger, like we discussed, like the PA system and such. I'm working on that independently because if that is something that we need for a safety feature, if we have to get in touch with, the crowd to shelter in place or anything like that, that is something I'm working on separately.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Questions? Yes.
I just think that is a really good point, Commissioner Hendricks. It's just right. Budget is like right now, and I know capital improvements may be different, but Laura, I think we really need a more manageable and definite plan. If we want to do some incremental improvements, we gotta plan for it. So I think we need to get on that pretty quick. I did have a note, which is assuming we are going with all these dates, which I assume we are, and they're locked. Can you just make sure we add them to the event schedule? I'm sure they're in there, but thanks.
Yeah, because I know we're already started to work on, and we're going to hear about it probably in a minute. The Speedway Alley, and that construction, and everything. So we have to make sure that, people are working in sync.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thanks. So next we have our executive director's report.
All right. The only thing I have is the one thing I added onto our event schedule for you in your packet is for the next 3 months is the soccer schedule dropped, as Lindsay said. So I did go ahead and add those. You'll see the first one is actually a league game. Opening game, which is the 25th. I did mark that there are road closures per Commissioner Hartley's request. We don't have any internally at this point. And then you'll also note that on the 28th, there is a League Cup game at 8:15. So that is not an MLS game, but that is also on the schedule for February. And then the March dates are on there. And as soon as we'll get, usually when probably later February, I'll start getting track practice dates from Bob and his new GM, and then we'll add those into the schedule as well and communicate those out once we get those scheduled.
questions? Yes.
That's great. Thank you, Laura. Just, I've gotten a little bit of feedback of just like, mostly like community members, like just wanting to, we do our part, we make this available, but anything we can do, any additional places we can post the fairground schedule, I think is good. Just a consolidated schedule, just to make sure people are aware of it. I see Councilperson Vo in the room, maybe we can have her send it out, but is there anything else we can do to just publicize? Because again, there's a lot of events here, and it's really awesome that we're having this available. I just want to make sure the community knows what's when.
Yeah, Christy does a great job at listing our events on our event page on our website, and also Councilmember Vo, thank you for coming. She was gracious enough to put several of our events on her newsletter, which was really helpful just to engage the district into what we're doing. We actually met yesterday after the Rotary meeting and kind of talked about how we can work together to kind of get that message out.
Any other questions? I was going to say, but I did have a question. Just to piggyback off of what Commissioner Hartley said, it's just, just taking a look at our website, and I understand we have an event section on our website, but I think maybe at a certain point we need to have a discussion about our website and the functionality of our website, because it's just, and I don't want to jump ahead of the presentation that, in some of my comments that I have about the presentation that we're going to hear. But when I took a look at some of the websites of the organizations that we were comparing ourselves to, and I look at their websites, I just look like a kindergartner did it, and the people have information. Like when you go onto their website, it talks about the facility. You can click on events. You can click on a link to find out sponsorships. You can click on a link to see what the functionality of the spaces are that are there. It gives a calendar, and even one goes even as far as into 2027 to talk about the dates of their fair. And I think that we need to start thinking like that, especially if we're going to compare ourselves to them, and we're going to get a presentation comparing ourselves to them. When I go and look at them, we look nothing like them. And I think that says a lot, because a person can go onto a website and find information easily. It may make it easy to rent the facility because people know what they're getting into when they go on to the website. And it just makes it was just more functional. And when I go onto our website, sometimes you got to click 4 and 5 and 6 different places. First of all, we have like 3 or 4 websites that talks about fairground stuff. And so I think it's just consolidated. I think we talked about this during the retreat. And so I think we need to take a look at that seriously. And it goes to what Commissioner Hartley is saying. It's like making it more accessible to the people in the community. So, yes.
I think it'll be worth, Laura, if you can just shed some light on what are the constraints or freedoms or lack thereof for actually changing websites and whatnot, right? I think that, I don't know, depending the comps that you're talking about for a feast.
Yeah, I've had a conversation with IT. I know what we can and cannot do. So right. we need to take a look at changing our website. We need to make sure, and it's up to each department, and we need to take control over it. We need to drive it. And so with IT, they can't even keep Nashville.gov, so we need to have a serious conversation about that.
Fully agree on the intent and the mission of the comment, just being familiar with a lot of times how hands can be tied. I think that we need to ask Laura, where can we be supportive to actually try to find that freedom, instead of just thinking, well, we need to improve it. Well, there's so many things that need to be improved in Metro that are very hard to improve because of bureaucracy. Just that my point is, it's not only a wanting to. There's a lot of obstacles in the way in my previous experience. So I think that we need to be as helpful as possible for them to actually be able to bring that freedom to us as a board or for them as a team to actually make those improvements. There's a lot of guardrails.
And we have examples. There are examples that they can take, especially from the list that we received from this report that we read. And I go to these other agencies that are just like ours, no matter where they are. I understand that we are Davidson County and we are separate, but you have to start with having the conversation and going into CIA. And we have not done that we haven't had the report. And we talked about this, and I mentioned it in our retreat back in November. And so so I hear what you're saying, but I think we also need to stop making excuses, and we need to.
I totally agree. Right. I think we need to have the best ammo to actually go to a very specific request, a strong request to the services that are provided to an agency or a department like Laura's. Right? It's not they don't have a marketing website design team that they control fully, but sure, we should have a strong request for the department. And I think also in my experience there is if we have a specific request, I think that we can actually be successful in making a lot of improvements right there. They're very good at their job, and if you give them clarity, they will deliver. So.
Any other questions? Next, we'll have our update for capital projects. So we're going to start with Mr. Henley.
All right. Good afternoon. Happy New Year. Want to make sure that I extend that Happy New Year to the staff, the board, council that's here. As I always do before diving into my report, I'll typically say that, you'll have figures in front of you that are about 30 to 45 days in arrears. Being candid, and with the holidays, I'd say it's probably more towards 60 to 75 days in arrears, just in terms of submission of invoices, review of invoices, and how that's migrated itself into the report in front of you. So just wanted to start with that. A little bit of a caveat, but I will highlight my report will be, all good news, which I think is good in the context that I've been hearing some of the comments earlier about financial state, financial condition. From a capital project standpoint, particularly with this facility, we are at that point where we've been kind of hovering around 99% in that spend. Right now, the remaining funds there are primarily allocated to FF&E. I think there's been a recent conversation that FF&E will be a big focus kind of in the next couple of weeks. I think it dovetails appropriately with all of the conversations around the upcoming budgeting session. If there aren't questions specifically about that, I think where you will see a lot of activity since I last came before the board is on Fair Park. And you'll see a lot of progress that's happened out there on site as well. When I was in front of you all in early December, we were at about 41% complete. As we've talked about, that project and that budget is very heavy in construction in terms of its allocations. Again, we've had essentially one bill come in since the last time we were in front of you all, but yet now we're 59% complete. And so that shows not only correlation to the amount of activity that's happened on site, but also highlighting that we've made significant progress there. Again, still about 60 days in arrears, so you will see some modifications and some continual trending in that construction line item. But all of the line items and that budget as a whole is in good shape. So I wanted to make sure to report that. There aren't questions specifically about that. The infrastructure part 2 budget is one we've had a whole % movement. But again, that's heavily related to, as again mentioned, the holidays, but also infrastructure work is largely in the design period for that. Our project team continues to work heavily with the Market Street team as well. A lot of work is ongoing there. We just have not received those invoices and have not made it to you yet. So that's the reason for that limited movement. But outside of that, again, on that project and where we're trending, all things are looking good from a budgetary standpoint. And so I wanted to just make sure to highlight that yet again for all those sections and categories.
Questions? I have one question. Sorry. Is there any money in the budget for like landscaping or something? I mean, over the holidays, I actually came over and just walked around the property, and I'm concerned when I see like bushes and on the sidewalk right out here going up to the walkway, up to the racetrack and up to the mixed-use development. It's like a little forest growing right there. Like, I mean, do we have any money in the budget to like fix that?
Laura may want to address that, but the answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there is. So in regards to Benton, that's us, and that's scheduled to be, the other half of that is scheduled to be completed by mid-February. As far as, and we just had this conversation this week of when the new Fair Park Phase 2 is completed, to ensure that we have a good maintenance agreement for about 3 years to kind of help get it established and such. But as far as Benton goes, that's already on our docket to get fixed before mid-February.
One thing to just consider, and I can't remember, Laura, on that point, remind me what our plan is, but, you know, the sort of park areas, you know, I believe I understand that sort of the plan is there's a sort of an agreement with Metro Parks to kind of help with that. And then sort of overall for the campus, I think we've talked about like a participation agreement on sort of landscaping. Does that exist yet, or is that sort of in the future thought process?
No, that is.
And can I just have one more thing?
Yeah.
And the reason is I think we owe it to our tenants and to ourselves to, similar to what Jasper was saying about the digital presence, is like, how can we present a unified and really high quality experience across the campus? And I think that would help. So please go ahead.
No, you're right. And that's one thing that often gets overlooked in capital projects is all the operational expenses that come after the fact, right? Increased utilities because you've got more light poles and, you know, more water bills because you've got more irrigation and all these things. Well, part of that is maintenance. And we've had several conversations with both Nashville SC and Market Street on how we're going to collaborate and figure out a way to, whether it be what approach has not been nailed down yet, but we all have the same desire and I think the same expectation for the quality of the aesthetics of the campus. And we've all, I think it's fair to say we've all agreed that we all have a responsibility to ensure that the shared spaces that we all use are maintained and that it doesn't fall to one person to do it or pay for it. So as far as the approach, not nailed down yet, but we are, I think it's fair to say we're all in agreement that to figure out what that approach is. There's no pushback there.
Well, and obviously everyone has a part to play in that, but I would certainly love for our partners to contribute their wonderful shares to this and to help make the campus a success. But at the same time, I mean, in all seriousness, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a participation based on sort of some kind of allocation of usage. So,
Thank you. Mr. Cowell.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Just to expand on what Ed was talking about, Phase 2 of Fair Park, the final wear surfaces, site amenities, and landscaping is essentially complete. Fencing particularly along Craighead, is going in right now, should be winding up in the next few weeks. The trailhead is still on back order. It'll be in sometime in February, as we understand it last. And then there's additional work that will be done sequencing on with the infrastructure part 2 and merging those two projects together. Part 2 of infrastructure, Windgrove, that aspect of it is we've got essentially we've got WEGO, NDOT, Metro Water, and everybody on the same sheet of music. And we should be, we're winding up the construction documents and we're going through who pays for what. And that's that phase of that. And we're also in the process of talking about contractors and how that might be procured. The Speedway Alley extension, which carries it from the garage around the south end of Speedway, across the builds of another bridge, across Browns Creek to Craighead. That extension is still in design. We're in the nitty-gritty details of how it merges with the work that mixed use is doing around the garage and the Speedway Alley, their portion of the Speedway Alley. The construction documents on that will be due in March, and we'll be continuing that conversation. We will be in the permitting process, which a lot of that we don't have control over. We're going over Browns Creek, so we're hoping for the best, but that's still continuing. And a lot of coordination on major services with NES and others, because we'll be having to tie into what was put in for Geodis Park and what they're putting in now in Speedway Alley. Dirk talked about Speedway Alley and Fair Plaza, his portion of it. We're working with them and monitoring what they're doing, and we're continuing through that. Pardon my voice. Anything else I can answer? The schedule is essentially the same that we presented last time.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I wanted to go back to one quick thing in Executive Director's report. Do we have an update on the RFQ for the food and beverage services?
Sure. So I think I emailed you guys just to let you know that the original, the RFP that we had published closed on December 4th with no bidders. So in conversations with the procurement officer, we are going to rebid it. I got some changes to the scope that were recommended by the purchasing agent completed prior to Christmas, and now we're just waiting on Municipal Auditorium to submit their scope of work, any changes that they want, and then they're going to reissue it. We're going to be working to figure out like who was interested, making sure that those who are registered in iSupplier, that there's enough people who know that they have to register to get the notifications that an RFP has been issued within their service area. Make sure that list is good and solid, and making sure that we do some advance work this time to make sure that everybody's contact information is updated in the system.
I have a question for Metro Legal, though, too. Is there a requirement as to how long RFP should be posted? Because when I looked at the date, when I went on the website after I was notified that no one pursued it, and I looked at the date, it opened on November 28th and closed on December 4th. So it was only open for 5 days. Because you have and it was a holiday.
Yeah, I mean, I would defer to the purchasing agent and her office on that question. I mean, I know that they do always strive to follow best practices in their area, but I've been only tangentially involved in various RFPs as a lawyer, and so I'm not actually sure like what the normal practice is in terms of how long a period for bidding is left open. Sometimes there's multi-stages, like sometimes you'll have like a phase 1 and a phase 2 and have like more than one, like kind of narrow down your candidates that way, but I don't know if that's anything that's going on here. But I would need to check with the purchasing agent's office, procurement.
And is there anything that precludes us from sending it out legally?
Yes, only the purchasing agent can legally solicit.
So we can't say, oh, this is available, go to the website and find out information.
Yeah, no, I think the purchasing agent's office needs to direct those communications with potential bidders.
What potential bidders? But what I'm saying, so the Fairgrounds can't go on our Facebook page and say we have opportunities available. here are,
I mean, you
check
might
out
be able
this
to
website.
include like a link to the RFQ while it's open or something like that, but I would want to check with Michelle Lane. Yeah.
Yes.
We had no bidders. So does that include remind me when our current F&B contract ends? And I mean, are they coming back? Like, what's the plan there?
It expires March 15th, and no, I don't expect them to bid.
It's D&D?
Correct.
So, I guess moving on, new business, consideration for an amendment to the contract with Track Enterprises to allow a Thursday evening race in June of 2024. So, Bob, would you mind coming up to present and let us know why this is a good idea?
Thank you. Basically, we, in our contract, have 10 race dates that we can do, and it's just been difficult to get 10. We ended up with 9, actually 8, I'm sorry. We ended up with 8, and between the soccer scheduling, flea markets, other racing, just society now, it was really hard. So the idea was Thursday night, June 27th, is the beginning of the NASCAR race at the Super Speedway. And that night made sense because we can maybe, if we get the right drivers to come, the right buzz, the right promotion, then we can get a pretty good crowd, which in turn helps, obviously, is what we're in business for, but also in our agreements with parking and concessions and more rent for you. As I hear your questions about revenue, it's also a chance for the Fair Board to, A, revenue, B, get a good showing of your campus, exposure to the world and the city about your facility. So what we look for is a lot of local events that we've talked about, but we also have had an SRX race. We've had some big events, and this we would look for one of our big events.
I guess before I call for a motion and only the board will be able to discuss and ask questions, I actually don't want to put on the spot, but Councilwoman Vo, I'm just curious, have you heard any feedback from community members regarding this? Because it's been out in the public that this could potentially happen. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to check, see if you... All right.
I think one thing I want to add to that is we are always conscious of the neighbors. So this being a weeknight, we would be very conscious. A short period, probably only have 2 or 3 divisions, where a normal night we'll have 8 to 10. So things like that, we'll be very conscious of getting done at no later than 9, shoot for 8:30, those type of things. So I just want to make sure you knew, even though sometimes I take that for granted because we really try hard every night, but this one we know is a weeknight, so we would be very conscious of the least amount of time on property we could have.
All right, thank you. Laura, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of go through, originally what we were thinking about doing is doing another full amendment to Bob's contract. However, it's getting really unwieldy at this point, as you all know, from when we did the contract extension. I mean, I feel like we're almost to a ream of paper. So because we hadn't gotten to a point where we fully executed the 2024 contract extension, Terry and Erica suggested that, a good option would be, since that isn't executed yet, to put this race, build it into the current one, and then send that out for to be approval. So it's one amendment, not 2. And so this is why you don't actually see it within the document yet, because that was kind of a later suggestion that made a lot of sense to me. So this is essentially the language that would be added if you're amenable to it and approve that.
I would just add that I'm fine with you all kind of approving this proposed language conceptually, and we will work it into the final amendment document. I think that's sufficient commission approval to proceed.
I appreciate that, because that's why I stopped signing things, because I got confused as to what I was signing. I was like, didn't I just sign this? And it was like something else. So, but thank you. So I guess, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll move this amendment as presented for discussion. Yeah.
Second? Yeah.
All right, it's been moved and properly second. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead, Anthony, please.
Bob, how many, not including this Thursday race, how many do we have? 8 or 9?
8, 9 counting this race.
And so then if we add this one, that'd be 9?
Yes, sir.
And then are there any plans to try to find a 10th one, or it's just nowhere to put it?
Nowhere to put it. Possibly, maybe a car show or a exhibition or something, but I highly doubt there'll be any other race come available for 2024.
Okay.
So I think last year we only had 9 also, so 9 is probably where we're going to end up.
Yes.
Bob, thank you for the overview. So just to make sure I understand conceptually, you've got the larger NASCAR race at the super speedway, and that I'm assuming is sort of Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Correct.
So you're kind of building a promotional front end event. People are in town for the other race, so they'll come to our race here at the facility.
Yes, fans and participants, drivers also. That's our chance to get a superstar that the NASCAR drivers, for instance, possibly would look at us because they're getting here. They have to be at the big track Friday morning anyway. Again, all that has to be worked on, but that'll be a project for me to continue that we have that opportunity. This has been done around the United States a lot. Other facilities will have a preliminary to the big NASCAR weekend.
So you think it will draw pretty well?
We're sure going to try hard. Yeah, but yes, we do, yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I actually just think he could too, because last year I participated in a event similar to this, but it wasn't here at the track, with Bubba Wallace, and that turned out a lot of people into the, and it ended up, it was at TSU's campus downtown because they didn't have any other place to go to, so they ended up having it there. So
Oh man, don't say it like that.
No, that was
like that, brother.
it wasn't a bad thing. It actually ended up being a good thing. It ended up being a good thing, but they were looking for space, and they ended up at TSU, and so it worked out. And it was it was very well attended.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good idea. Pending, I'm just really concerned. We haven't heard any negativity. I mean, there's been none whatsoever.
I haven't put this out very much until your vote, so, but we don't expect
people
any.
Normally when
I'm
we
surprised
put
you've
stuff
heard
up
about it.
when we put stuff up on the website, like this, but no one received an email. No one.
No, I got one or two communications, but that's not necessarily a reason to do it or not do it. I think we just balance all the equities. I did have a quick question, probably for Metro Legal, which is, why is the reason we need an amendment is it because it's a weekday, or what's the reasoning that it's not within the 10 races that is already due?
Yeah, it is because it's a weekday.
Okay. And I think the general concern with weekdays is around school and families, things like that, but this is in the summer, so I'm less concerned about that. And I think I really do appreciate the respect for timing. So that's my statement.
We also did take into consideration the school. Yes, we did. So that's why all this just kind of matched up with this date.
And so, and piggyback on this, my last question would be, so in addition to the race, will you have any practices?
Just that day.
Just that day.
Not the day before like normal. No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
If the race is approved, is the Speedway going to help with the publicity of our event?
I called them already, and they said yes.
Cool.
I don't have it in writing, but I called them first to check and make sure they didn't have something going on Thursday night. They said they did not. I told them what I wanted to do, and they said they would support it.
And a logistics type of question. Sounds like a great event, and if it could be as big as we would all hope it to be, but being right before a big event, that it's a multi-day event, from a logistics perspective, road closures, all that stuff, how big of an event could it be that would be a problem to be on a Thursday, 6:30 p.m.? People would be getting here around, I assume, an hour before that or so. So you have traffic in all directions, 5:30 on a Thursday night.
Yeah, so, I mean, we seat 11,000 people. So, again, a goal, if we get 5,000, that's a big crowd. We were sold out for the SRX one time, probably won't get that. So 5,000 compared to 25 at the soccer stadium, I don't think it'll be any problems with road closures or anything.
Thanks.
But are you prepared to work with traffic mitigation and all that?
Yes, we do during the All-American 400. We ask for a road closure. We're prepared with security. And if we would be fortunate enough to get it that big, we would follow a lot of the soccer protocol and procedures, yes.
Yes.
Laura, is there anything else? I mean, I don't have the calendar that far out. What else is going on on the campus around that time period? Assuming this was a hole in the campus schedule, so it's while we're doing it. But is there any conflicts, other events around then?
No, I don't recall exactly what events we have that weekend, but it's move-in. It's move-in that day for some events. Yeah. No, it was nothing that, like...
We looked at it.
Right.
More questions? All right. Well, let's call for the vote. So let's start over here. Commissioner Diego.
Aye.
Commissioner Owens.
Aye.
Commissioner Hartley.
Aye.
And Commissioner Hendricks is aye. So.
Great.
All right.
Thank you, Commissioners. We'll keep you updated as we move forward.
All right. Thank you.
I hope it's a great event.
Yep. Next on the agenda is a fee study presentation.
Okay, I just want to make sure that our technology is working. I've got Catherine here from Strategic Venue Solutions. Hi, Catherine. Can you hear us okay?
Hello. Yes, I can.
Brilliant. She's also up on the TV, as you can see. I'm going to minimize this because I wanted Catherine to be able to introduce herself, but we also have a slide presentation that we would like to share. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. But Catherine, if you want to just introduce yourself and talk about your background, that would be great.
Okay, great. Hi, thank you for the opportunity to be here and present the study to you. As Laura said, my name is Catherine Surratt. I'm the president of Strategic Venue Studies. It's a consulting firm that I started in 2018 after having spent the previous couple decades working for some larger hospitality consulting firms. So my firm specializes in meeting, recreation, sports, and event venues, performing a variety of services from feasibility studies to economic impact, site selection, benchmarking studies, anything related to the industry and development within the industry. I've done, over the past decade or so, over 100 projects in a variety of different types of venues. So with that, I'm happy to present some of these slides that will show you some of the highlights, some of the conclusions and recommendations that we came up with. It's a lot of information, and I'm going to go kind of quickly through it because I know time is of the essence, but if you have any questions as I'm going through, please feel free to just stop me and go ahead and ask.
All right, Catherine, can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay, brilliant. And you all have it in your packet.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, great. So I guess we'll start with the next slide, slide 2. This is the project methodology. So there's several steps when considered together that lead to the conclusions and recommendations, final projections that are included in this study. The 3 main components of it are the study of the local market and the competitive venues in the market, looking at the historical fairgrounds operation, and then an evaluation and investigation into what's going on with similar venues in the industry. So these 3 things lead to finding opportunities that are available and to developing some new projections of financial operations, assuming that certain set of recommendations are performed. So this study also included, in addition to that, an overhead allocation analysis that looked at peer venues and with the goal of understanding how they allocate their overhead to the events that they host. So on to the next slide. So this slide presents the historical event demand for fiscal year 2023, and then also looks ahead to events on the books for 2024 and 2025. Of note is that in 2024, the upcoming year, bookings have increased from the 2023 values, which is good. The 2025 current bookings are lower. There's still time to book those events, and I'm sure that since I got this data a couple of months ago, there's probably been a few more booked events since that time. So the Fairgrounds is very busy. There's 381 use days. However, the occupancy rate there is 36%, is somewhat low. And so that really suggests that there is capacity to book some larger shows that use more square footage within the facility itself. Next slide, slides 4 and 5 then. 4 and 5. These next two present the financial data for fiscal year 2023. So there are a variety of event revenue sources that generate events from the event rentals and from the flea market. These figures do not include the Nashville Fair. So you've got the expo hall rental of other facilities within the fairgrounds, the booth rental, equipment rentals, parking, etc. If you look at the next slide, this applies the unallocated expenses to that revenue, which yields around a $1.7 million loss when you consider depreciation, which is a large number, and then without that depreciation, around $385,000 of loss. So this data, this financial data, in conjunction with the detailed historical demand data, was used for the basis for developing an operating model that I used to move forward in the projections of future operations.
Hey, Catherine, thank you so much. This is
Yes,
Todd.
hi.
This is Todd Ardley. I'm one of the board members. I just have a question for you to make sure I'm tracking you. What I'm hearing you say as a summary of the last two slides, the revenue side you're using is essentially everything we do at the facility in the expo halls, including the flea market. And then on the expense side, would this be our entire expense, our entire set of expenses? That's probably maybe a question for Laura.
Yes, excluding the fair.
Okay, so this is all of our expenses excluding what you're allocating to the fair, and then the revenue, which is it's probably close to a straight line, but I just want to make sure it's all the revenue for the expo centers and the flea market. So it excludes all revenue that we get from sort of rentals and, third parties and all of our sort of landlord duties as we've talked about.
No, that's included at the bottom.
That's included. If you go back to the previous slide, you'll see slide 4.
Okay, the lease revenue.
Lease revenue, yeah.
What I mean by that is okay, thank you. What I'm getting at is our future sort of tax abatement that we'll get from mixed use with that's not included here. Okay, I got you. I'm just trying to understand what each side of the ledger we're looking at. But I'm tracking.
Yeah, and what's important to note here too is that it's very helpful for us that Fair has its own business unit because it's so easy just to pull those numbers out. Everything's so segregated there. So we're trying to do the same thing, and that is our goal going into this next budget, to do that same thing and separate out flea market from corporate sales so we have a really good idea of revenue and expenses associated with those specific business units. So we're going to be actually separating that out to make that even more clear for you moving forward.
Thank you, Catherine. Please continue.
Okay, sure, yeah. Okay, so let's go on to a couple slides down, slide 6 then. So this is the slide that shows the local market, the local meeting and event venue inventory in Nashville and their indoor capacities. So there's a variety of different types of events that host indoor events. And as you can see, with a capacity of over 7,000, over 7,300, and over 100,000 square feet of flat floor space. The Fairgrounds really is uniquely positioned within the market to be this cost-effective option for consumer shows, trade shows, and as well as these local events that might need a large amount of flexible floor space. So it really fits in nicely with the overall inventory of the event venues within Nashville. Slide 7. So looking at the what I call comparable venues, I looked at 3 different groups of these venues. The first 2 groups would be considered competitive, and that first group is the nearby agricultural centers. So they are nearby, but they are much smaller than the space available at the Fairgrounds. And then the second group there in the middle are the regional convention centers that are in Tennessee and neighboring states. I don't include things like Louisville or, the big convention center in Louisville, the big convention centers in Atlanta, et cetera. Those are just not competitive. But these smaller convention centers do have comparable amounts of space compared to the Fairgrounds. And I would call these traditional convention centers in that they have exhibit space, they have ballroom space, and they have meeting space. So while they can host expos and public events like the Fairgrounds does, they also have the capacity to host conventions, conferences, social events, and things like that. So they're they're a slightly different type of venue. And so that brings us to the third group, which is where most of the analysis has taken place, are these peer fairgrounds and expo centers. And I selected them specifically because these are in medium to large metropolitan areas, similar to Nashville. And so this is the comparable set of these fairgrounds. They're not competitive with Nashville, with the Fairgrounds, but as analog venues, they do provide information, important comparisons, the building components, the operations, best practices, and they could really help evaluate the fees that are charged at the Fairgrounds. And slide 8. So this figure gives you an idea of how the Fairgrounds compares with these other venues, this third group of expo centers and Fairgrounds. A lot of information on this slide. I realize that you may want to take a look at it later to kind of absorb it, but I can point out a few things. And first is the color of the bubble. So there is a lot of different ways and types of organizations that own and operate Fairgrounds. Those that are in blue operate as enterprise funds similar to the Fairgrounds. The size of the bubble indicates the size of the available space for rent. And then the y-axis shows the published rental rate in dollars per square foot. So in terms of market size and how it's governed and operated, and then the venue size, I find that the Fairgrounds most closely resembles the Fairgrounds in Raleigh, North Carolina State Fairgrounds, and the Minnesota State Fairgrounds in St. Paul. And as it happens, the Fairgrounds currently has a lower rental rate than both of those venues that are operating as enterprise funds and have a similar size than Nashville. So slide 9. So in addition to the rental fees, there was also an analysis of other revenue generating activities. We've got our non-event rental, which are the move-in and move-out days. We've got equipment rentals, service fees, and then the other revenues from parking and food and beverage. So some of the conclusions are on this slide. First, starting with the rental rates, the analysis finds that the Fairgrounds really has that opportunity to make some modest market-based adjustments to its expo hall rental rates, just to better align with similar venues and the industry benchmarking that we just saw. Move-in and move-out fees. The industry standard and the most common non-event day rental is 50% of the regular daily rental rate. The Fairgrounds currently charges $500 today, or $500 per day, which is well below that 50% mark, really suggesting that there's a good opportunity there to match some industry standards with the move-in and move-out rentals. Service fees, these are equipment rentals and service for different labor. The published rates that the Fairgrounds has are really consistent with other venues. But I have found that there is this opportunity to identify more services that you can charge for, which similar venues collect those fees for those services. So there is a big opportunity there. And then on the other revenue, the Fairgrounds is fairly consistent. So the food service delivery system is consistent, as are the commission rates. And also the per vehicle parking rate at $10 is also consistent. And that seems to be the standard rate for venues that do charge for parking. So slide 10. So now we know there's an opportunity for to adjust the fees to be more in line with the market, but we have to move on to what are some reasonable expectations and recommendations for those adjustments. And to do this, I expanded the analysis to include some detailed financial data from 10 similar venues in my database. And so these can provide specific metrics for what is going on in the industry. And the next couple of slides present that analysis. So first, in this figure, we look at the annual rental revenue per total square feet of rentable space. And so we can see that the Fairgrounds at $6.71 is near the bottom. It's not the lowest, but it's certainly below the average of what other venues are getting in terms of dollars per the total square foot of their venue. And this is just rental revenue. It doesn't include food and beverage or parking or event services or anything. This is just totally sheer rental revenue. And then on to slide 11, we move to the service revenue. And right now, the Fairgrounds is only collecting for equipment rentals. But as I mentioned above, there is that good opportunity to collect additional revenues for additional services that can be provided by Fairgrounds staff or that just consume the Fairgrounds resources. And so since the Fairgrounds is not currently collecting these, it is really low compared to the others. It's well below the average, with 21% of rent being, or the service revenue is 21% of the rent revenue, and only $1.42 being collected in service revenue per total square feet. So on to the recommendations, three main recommendations. First, I recommend an 8% increase in the public rental rates at the Expo Center. Second, an increase in the fees for move-in and move-out to match the industry standard of 50% of the daily rental rate. It's the most common fee charged. And finally, looking at event service, if we're looking at it, I want to set a goal for the service revenue that ranges between 35 and 42% of the rent revenue. And that varies by the type of event. So, for instance, a public expo would be expected to earn less or earn a different amount than, say, a concert or a trade show. And so this goal can be reached in two ways, twofold opportunity. First, a modest increase in the rates of 5%, and then also identifying other services that can be charged to customers. And these may be audiovisual, utilities, event staffing. There's a variety of different services. And then also, kind of a side note, but we also discussed that there's an opportunity to increase gross revenues by finding larger events. And this will increase all revenues. When you find these newer and larger events that can book the venue that are taking up more space, they will create additional revenue. And there certainly is that opportunity, as we discussed with the occupancy rate.
Catherine, sorry to interrupt you. This is Todd again, as usual. So in that last point, it's something you're seeing in the data, and maybe Laura, you could chime on this too. We talked when we were touring the facility recently that often only part of an expo hall might be used. Is this sort of an example of, well, don't just rent half, try to find someone that will take the whole space so you can essentially maximize your revenue by not increasing your expenses that much in line because you're using all the space? Is that kind of a way to think about that last point, non-numbered point on this slide?
Yes, I think that's exactly it. You know, you're going to be there anyway, so you've got your fixed costs, which are going to be the same no matter what the size of the event, and the incremental costs of the larger event with utilities and all of that. You're certainly going to make more from an event that's going to take up more space. That's just going to need more of your of your area.
Catherine, this is Jasper. I have a question. In coming up with the recommendations and taking a look at some of these other facilities, was there any research done around how they maybe do advertising or sponsorship dollars or revenue?
That was not part of the study, studying advertising or sponsorships. You mean like naming rights and things like that?
Correct, yes.
Or,
yes.
Yeah. That does go on, but that was not part of this study.
Piggybacking on Jasper's question, Catherine, a couple things. I know you looked at peer facilities. I don't know if you came to the facility or not. A couple of questions. Did you consider the relative quality of facilities and two sort of relatively unique aspects about our facility, which is, I'm going to call it a relative lack of parking available, and the fact that we have some large tenants on campus that you could potentially jointly sell against. Did you consider any of those factors, or how should we think about those factors?
So I definitely considered the fact that it's a new facility, and some of these other fairgrounds are certainly much older, and some of their venues are quite old, which is why I looked at what they're charging at their highest for their best spaces, because they've certainly got spaces that maybe aren't air conditioned or are certainly not as desirable. So looking at the average rental might skew it a little bit. So I looked at what their highest was, because that's going to be their best spaces, their newest, which is going to be most comparable to what you all have with a new venue, rather than the older venues.
And this is Jasper, and I have a question. And it would be, and also doing this research, was there any consideration into like packaging services? So like, for instance, I've noticed that a couple of, as I do events, I do things around the city, and when I'm contacted, for instance, I reached out to the Noah Lift Opera Center, right? And they have corporate packages, right? So for $7,000, you get 4 hours, drapes, AV, things like that. They list what it is for $7,000. Then they list what you get for $10,000. Then they list what you get for $15,000. Was there any consideration, or was that any of that using this, coming up with some of this recommendations?
No, I mean, I was mostly looking at what your chart and what you're getting from the raw numbers, the raw financial data. How that's sold and how it's packaged was not part of this analysis. It was more, what are you specifically getting for each of those items, for the rent, for the equipment rentals, et cetera, and how does that compare with what other venues are doing? There are packaged deals, but that was not part of this analysis.
Hi, Catherine. This is Diego. You have the one question for those comps that are on the lower side of the rates. Do any of them state any kind of subsidy, or they recognize their lower rate as part of a program for supporting local businesses, small businesses, anything like that, and in a way of openly justifying it?
Have different rates for, say, a nonprofit. They have a specific published rate for nonprofits, specific rates published for, say, a community organizer and that sort of thing. Not all of them, but some of them do, and I do have that data.
Thank you.
I think those are all the questions. Those are all the questions right now.
All right. So, slide 13. Okay, so with those recommendations in mind, the next part of the analysis is the overhead allocation. It's a really valuable tool for any venue owner. It helps determine the overall profitability of an event, assist in negotiating the rents so you know just how profitable that event is going to be, negotiating event service fees, et cetera. Maybe if you do come up with those package deals, all of this helps to understand what's going into this event in terms of the expenses, and how you can recoup some of the costs by directly charging them as event services. So again, using this aggregate data from the database, the really important thing to note here is that overhead expenses that are allocated to events, virtually every venue is going to allocate more than they're actually charging to the events. So they understand that there are costs associated with the events. They've identified those costs, and they understand that they're not going to charge all of those costs. So it's always more. The expenses that they allocate to events seems to always be more than what they're collecting in terms of service revenue. And on average, it's around 123% higher cost than what the service revenue actually is. And then the next slide shows some typical expenses that are allocated to events. So they're broken into three main categories. There's different labor associated with an event. You've got your services, and then equipment and supplies, a longer list there. And these are the typical things that event organizers will see that they will pay for as they book their event. And so this next slide shows an example of how to determine what your expense allocation is. So also important to note that we're not trying to change any expenses. The expenses are the expenses. What it costs to run an event doesn't change. All we're doing is taking some of those expenses from an unallocated line item and moving them to an allocated line item up above that's more related to the event services. So if we take an event service expense to the event service revenue ratio of 115%, as you recall, the average was around 123%, so a little bit less than that. We are going to look at a goal of allocating around $368,000 of expenses to events, moving things up from unallocated overhead up to a line item that is associated with events. And so these things are going to be staffing costs, utilities, equipment supplies, contract services, internet, and those types of things. So the next two slides then are the 5-year projection. So note that in the event revenue line, there is an additional line that comes into play in 2025, which is called additional event services. And that is these additional, whether they're labor or different rentals or different fees that are charged. Those are the additional event services that you can collect from your tenants or your events that host. The other thing to note is that under the event expense category, there's additional allocated event service costs which come into play in 2025. And those are what we just talked about, moving those expenses up from the unallocated. So you've got those two new line items in the financial projection. And then on to the next slide shows that after a 2-year phase-in of all of these recommendations, the increase in the fees and the allocation of the new additional event services and the allocation, we get to in 2026 a positive net income without considering the depreciation. And then the next slide, this is really just an example of this expense allocation to show how that works. And so you've got in 2025, you've got your 70, which are the existing and external event services, which you already have. And then you've got your new allocated event service costs. And those together equal that 368,000 goal number that we were looking at. And then if you look at 2024 to 2025, you'll see that salaries, benefits, utilities, contract services, and the other circled items, those go down from 2024 to 2025. And they're not decreasing. They're just moving up to that 297,000 line item. So they're moving from below to above as you allocate those costs.
I have a question, and the projections and well, that's going to be a few questions, so bear with me.
Okay.
And your projections, are you discounting in any way the effect of increasing rate, right? Because right now you're saying, well, our base of events in a year is X. By increasing the rate, I'm going to be ignorant for a second here and assume that that will make some of our existing market that is hiring us to do their event, they wouldn't, because now we're too expensive, right? We're going to put ourselves out of a certain market that we're in right now. How are you discounting that in projections? And well, let's start with that, and then I'll ask the other two questions after that. Or are you discounting that at all and assuming that we would lose, but then how do we justify gaining the new market segment by being 8% more expensive?
I think that there might be a phase in, but I think that you'll get events back. You've got a nice facility. It's brand new. You've got, it's uniquely positioned in the market. You're a good market. I mean, Nashville's a great market. Mm-hmm. I think that you'll fill up those spots, even if people leave.
Perfect. That's a great segue for the other question. So in your experience, is 8% increase like, how can we feel more comfortable that's the sweet spot and that's not too low, too high? What have you seen how it impacts other venues that have done an increase of a similar amount? And what you say, right? The facing and whatnot is you've done this for a while. What can we expect to happen once we say, okay, we go with an increase, say it's going to be 8%, paint a picture for us and what we could expect to happen and to feel more comfortable in the qualitative around the 8%. Not the math makes sense, but the qualitative in your experience.
Well, first of all, it is phased, so it's not a big jump into 8% right away. So we are looking at phasing over 2 years to kind of ease into it a little bit. And I think true, you might people are not going to be happy, but I think that with what you've got, just like I said, what you've got your systems in place for booking events, and as dates open up, those good dates are going to open up. They're going to fill. I mean, that's what I've seen. If someone leaves, I've found that there's only so many weekends in a year, and that's why occupancies are not 98%, and you consider 50% really, really busy, because there's just a certain number of dates that are available. And so if those weekend dates open up, people are going to fill them. I mean, those are the.
And we can have a campaign, book now before we charge more.
Well, and to put it in perspective a little bit, our Expo 1 is approximately $5,000. So your 8% is $400. So just throwing that out there on how that whole 8% phased in over 2 years, 4%.
Right, and for most events, it's a marginal increase.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay. And then these projections do consider that you are working for weekday events. There's a slight discount, or you're working at a discount. Those types of things. Those are all baked into this model.
So just for clarity and transparency, especially for our clients, while the 8% is pretty modest, actually, for the building rental itself, probably the largest financial impact to our clients is going to be the change for our move in, move out. Because if you think about it, we do $500 a day. That can jump significantly based on how many days it takes them to move in and move out. So it was something that we always planned to do when we moved in here, to evaluate that fee and implement that, and then COVID, and then getting back in the swing of things, and here we are. So that's going to be probably the biggest financial impact at this point to our clients, depending on, and that also assumes that they keep the same number of move in, move out days that they currently have. Because what we look at is if they're moving in or moving out, it's space and days that remain unavailable to us to book anybody else.
Correct. And
So-
to highlight what was mentioned, it is
Exactly.
best practice to do
Correct.
it the way that they're recommending us to do it, not the way that we're doing it now.
Right.
Like we're probably leaving a lot on the table right now. It's costing us clearly a lot.
Yeah, so I would say that I agree with some of it, but not all of it. The recommendations. I'm just totally against raising the price for people when we have not done our due diligence to find other sources of revenue. I mean, you know, we hear people talking about expenses and how expensive Nashville is getting, how, you know, and I know it's, you know, I work in politics, I get it. You know, a lot of people have talking points and people have a lot to say. But when you take a look at it in reality, I mean, what are we doing when it comes to advertising dollars? So what is the difference between seeking advertising dollars versus sponsorship dollars? You know, and could that be a workaround for council when we have billboards outside? Like, what are we charging for billboards? What are we doing? You know, and if we do an increase, then I would like to see a nonprofit rate. And so, you know, so that way community organizations will not see the, you know, we're not continuing to tax the citizens of Davidson County. And it could be maybe nonprofits of Davidson County, you know, so that way we can make sure that it is specifically for organizations that are servicing the people of Davidson County. But until we, as a body and as an organization, start thinking outside of the box a little bit more instead of just keep increasing fees, you know, and start looking at, you know, a lot of people say everybody wants to come to Nashville. You know, why don't we have an Alliance Bernstein billboard outside? Why don't we have a Bridgestone billboard? It's a racetrack out here. Have we gone to Bridgestone tire company that every racer uses and say, hey, can you invest in our track? Can you help us with some of our expenses over here for a racetrack? You know, and I don't think that we've done that. You know, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen a yes or a no. I haven't seen where we've reached out to Bridgestone and they said no. You know, we have a lot of entities, a lot of companies that are coming here that are not paying taxes, you know, to be here in Nashville, in Davidson County, but we're not going to them to say, hey, can you help us provide services for community members? And so, but I do agree with the whole half day, you know, charging, you know, for people because you are utilizing the space, you know, and I think a lot of times people you take advantage of, you know, saying, oh, well, yeah, we're going to move in because, you know, they can fiddle around for a couple of days, you know, for some time and only paying a couple of dollars, you know, and so yes, raise that. But as far as the fees to utilize the facilities, if we're going to raise it, I would like to. I can't support it unless we say we're going to offer nonprofit discount or, you know, something for Davidson County residents.
I agree. I would just comment, they're not mutually exclusive, right? The adjustment in rates is based on a market study, and are we charging as much as we could fairly charge, right? That's one thing. Totally agree that if and I believe that we all want to continue benefiting the community, truly, the issue right now is that you have a beneficial fee that is benefiting everyone, regardless if you're a nonprofit, if you're whatever. So you're just giving everyone the benefit at the expense of the taxpayer, right? By flipping that into, well, we have fees that are like we charge what a venue of this quality and this geography, et cetera, should be charging per market rate. Now, if you demonstrate that you should be getting a benefit as a group, whichever it is the description that we come up with, saying like, then you're the one that got the waiver and you get the true benefit, right? A programmatic approach to that and say, well, we have a program, we want to benefit specific groups, right, with special rates, but the rate should be the rate that the venue needs, because that's not only it's right or wrong, right? It's a financial decision. this thing's going to fall apart if we don't charge enough, and it just be a matter of years, and then you're going to get to the taxpayer again to rebuild the remodel capital projects. All that stuff's going to be spending money if this doesn't bring money on its own, right? So it needs to be sustainable. It needs to be at a good market rate, in my opinion. But totally agree that if we're going to be spending or subsidizing a specific program where we want to benefit, it needs to be very clearly defined who gets the benefit at the cost of who's going to be paying for that, right? And that's where I think you can combine a lot what you're saying, with bringing other external partners into helping with that subsidy, right? And I mean, that's great PR for them too. But it's specific. It's not very attractive if you don't specify it and help us with what to help whom. Today we don't have that, right? But again, I just think they're not mutually exclusive. I think we can work on those two things in parallel and say, well, when how we increase that as a venue, and then as a metro department, as a mission, how do we actually make up for benefiting the community and protecting the groups that I think we all want to protect, right? It is getting expensive. This will be the only place where a lot of events could happen. If we overdo it, we're going to lose that as a city, right? We don't want that. Now, if we don't do it, we're going to lose the fairgrounds as we know them too. So we have to strike a balance there.
I think that's all really good information. I think I'm with you mostly, Diego. I think one thing to consider is we're also looking at one business unit of our overall operations here at the fairgrounds. That's why I raised at the beginning, we've got a very large yearly tax allocation coming to us that's going to make the expense line look totally different. So we might be able to get away with like as an example, like a 6% increase because we know we've got $1 million in tax coming from our man Dirk over there. So like we should think about that, all the parts of the campus working together. I love Dirk. We should think about all the parts of our campus working together because we don't just do events at the fairgrounds. We operate a multi-tenant campus as landlords, and that is another business unit. So that's part of sort of easing the tension that's Jasper's raising about. We don't want it to be too much of a burden because we have to look at our full expense and revenue potential. And by leaving those pieces aside, we may be overshooting what we need to do from a revenue perspective. And then the other point, and Jasper, I definitely hear you that we have untapped sources of revenue. But another thing to consider is one of the reasons we haven't gotten there. I think there's some management things we can do, and I think we've given Laura direction on that. Like I agree with Jasper. We need to be pursuing sponsorships. We need to be pursuing, corporate partnerships and things like that. But there is also an expense allocation that we'll need to do that. There's probably some incremental costs to make those deals happen. So it's not completely straight line. I think there's some optimization there for sure. But again, these are all non-mutually exclusive. I think Diego said it well. Like we can kind of do all these things. We can do a reasonable fee increase, certainly some of these additional expenses, those kinds of things. The overall cost to our mixed-use tenants, we can increase. At the same time, we can task Laura to look for those new sources of revenue and give her the tools to make that happen. And we can consider whether we have to go all the way. So I think all these things are sort of good tools in our tool belt to get us, again, with the goal being, in my mind, is always to get that stipend from the city down to zero. So that's a big part of it.
I would like to add a little bit about the revenue source that we'll be getting from Market Street.
Uh-oh. Make sure it's not...
it is allocated for capital. It's not for operations.
Point taken.
And I'm assuming also that we, because it is a ramp, right, as it goes increase, there's mechanisms to review and then say, you know what, we may never have to gate all the way to 8, right? Because while we're working on parallel to do all these other things, when we reach 6.5%, then that's it. And that's a sweet spot. Then 8% was assuming that we're doing everything else the same. Now, when we don't do same on the other swimming lanes, then we might not have to do it or all the way or not as fast or maybe faster if we don't get to do it on the other and then problems that we don't know are in front of us start happening, right? So I think that it's also not, we don't have to marry to a specific number or specific ramp, or we can draw mechanisms where we can actually say, all right, we're going to review this every number of months or whatever it is that we would have to do with legal and say, well, we have to reapprove or decide, vote on the next increase, but more modularly, right? Instead of just going, like, well, we approve the ramp today for the next 2 years.
I think I probably jumped the gun a little bit. I should have asked Laura, what do you think about this report, and like, what are your takeaways? You have to be here every day.
Nobody likes to be the person that raises rates. Very frank. However, what I've been charged with is to make sure that, our rates and our services are reasonable, best industry practices. We knew when we moved down here that we were going to need to do this. I think 8% is acceptable. Like I said, I know that the transition to the move-in, move-out dates are going to be the most financially impactful, and I think that is going to be a conversation that we are going to have 100 times with our clients. And what that can result in, again, is we're very conscientious about phase-in, because a lot of these events are planning budgets and planning their events a year in advance. So, it's going to be phased in naturally from that perspective. But it also may streamline things a little bit, right? And open up even more dates if they're, it's easy to take 4 days to move in if you're only paying $2,000, but if you have to pay $2,000 a day, you might shrink that up and open up more space, which is a big conversation that we had with Catherine and Ryan, our event services manager, and Satrice is, we also need to look at volume. We can look at larger venue, full venue events, because as Catherine said, that is going to naturally bring more revenue from other sources too, right? Revenue shares like food and beverage, parking, things like that. So it's not just a fee increase, it's also putting a charge back on us to evaluate our event schedule and see if there are opportunities to do full venue. One of the things that we've been looking at long term is closing in the arena. That would allow us to invest in that space and have a space for smaller events, which would keep this open for full venue events while still providing a smaller, affordable space for those one building or half a building events.
Well, it looks like there's a bunch of capital money coming from Dirk, so you should be able to afford that.
I'm already spending it.
What's the furthest date event that's scheduled?
Well, we kind of have perpetual events that we just carry over from one year to the next. But right now we are booking into 2025. I don't think we've got a 2026 calendar established yet, but in theory we do, because we anticipate some of these legacy events can, booking again into 2026.
But they don't sign multi-year, they just sign a year.
They don't, correct, they don't.
Is that another option, that people sign a multi-year contract?
No, we've talked about that, but some of the challenges that we have is ensuring insurance coverage and other logistics. So, yeah, it is something that we have talked extensively to legal about in the past, is what are our options there with long term. It puts a lot of onus on both parties to make sure coverage is in place. That's the biggest sticking point right now for us. And I think, is that fair, Terry, is making sure that, insurance coverage is in place and active before the event occurs.
And in an evolving and changing world, I would caution us to be careful and not necessarily going too hard at the long term. Because again, if you have a smaller, if we commit long-term to smaller events, then we are cannibalizing our ability to actually sell other events that are bigger, more profitable, et cetera, that will be more convenient for the venue, right? So as
No, what I'm talking about is, like, for instance, part of the NAACP, we know where our conference is going to be until 2030. Like, we signed contracts already to 2030. Like, I mean, so, and that's thousands, that's full venue. So I'm not talking about
a contract in the future, not necessarily a recurring contract year over year.
So I'm not talking about small scale, I'm talking about large scale.
Yeah.
So some of these, so because those yearly things aren't guaranteed because they don't have a contract. So we can't bank on the bead show coming in 2027 because they may decide in 2025 that we've had enough of Nashville and move on to something else. You know, I mean, so that's only like, there has to be a way, and I know, and in some places offer you deals if you sign multi-year. So I'm the board chair of Bomb Congress. We got a great deal for a hotel because we signed a 3-year contract with the hotel, and so it kept our rate at, you know, as an organization, it benefits us as an organization, but it also gives that company, you know, 3 years saying, oh, you know, we know we're going to at least have this revenue for 3 years.
I think for me, I definitely hear where you're coming from, Jasper. And I as a promoter, often go for the multi-year deal because you can lock the price down. I actually think where we are as a venue and where the demand level is, I think actually our strategy right now is it's almost better to be year to year because the tenants don't have a lot of other options. So they're kind of coming back even without it signed. And that kind of gives us a one-way leverage to ratchet up and down. So something to think about.
We can't think like that as the city is growing. Like, you know how many cranes are in the sky. So people are giving choices about it. And it may not be the Fairgrounds. They may find something better. You know, because it's glitzy and glamorous. You know, more glamorous. I mean, we're going to start building 40 and 50 floor buildings downtown.
I point taken. I mean, things could change. I think what this study talks about is that we have actually a relatively unique facility given its size and quality in this market. But I mean, it's a mixture of both. Like, we could look at both, and maybe
it's also not mutually exclusive, right?
Yeah, you
can do long term, but under certain circumstances, certain size,
deals,
certain type of events, and
I'm in some of my events that I organize are on multi-years, some are on single years with just sort of handshakes. So it's a mixture. So
I just want y'all to know, I don't like no. There's always a way to figure out.
Oh, yeah.
So I hope y'all understand.
And if I might circle back a little bit, Laura, what you were saying that, no one ever likes to be the one that raises rates. I think it's important that at least in my opinion, we look at this as in we're actually adjusting the rate and we're catching up with market rates, right? This is not, and this is not a tax increase, and this is not, let's not politicize what we're doing. And again, the way that we can actually cure this process from being viewed that way is we are adjusting our rates to what the market rate is based on the type of venue that we're running. And we are looking into creating a program that will benefit those that are priced out of the market otherwise, right? That is our competitive advantage. We can give you a deal because we are not a private entity that is for profit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think, or at least I'm not planning on apologizing in any form or fashion saying because we're increasing rent. No, we're trying to charge what we should be charging to actually keep this place looking as good as it looks today. And that actually enables being able to support the community that we want to support, right? So it's not I don't want us to give it a negative tone, the rent increase or maybe some PTSD of those tax increases that we're actually making up for things. But it's important to know that we're not going to be the most expensive venue in town. That is for sure. Definitely not with the new stuff coming up and whatnot. So it's important to know that this is an adjustment. It's not a willy-nilly increase, right?
Yes.
I just wanted to follow up a little bit more and expand on the insurance issue that Laura raised a minute ago. Our director of insurance in our legal department will review Fairgrounds contracts to approve the insurance. And It kind of varies from event to event, but especially with smaller promoters, they may get insurance that's event specific as opposed to just having insurance all the time. The larger promoters will probably have insurance all the time. But if we book those, with the smaller promoters where it's event specific, if we book those too far in advance, it's tricky for us to be absolutely sure if we review it at the time that the contract is signed, that the insurance will actually be in place when the event occurs. So we've put in a process where we kind of do a double check to make sure that the insurance is still in place a couple of weeks before the event goes forward. But even with the larger promoters, policies are only good for a year. So to be, I'm not sure how beyond a year you can be absolutely certain that you'll have insurance in place other than just.
Maybe that's a good example, but you could have as a condition, right, and say you would only be able to sign a multi-year contract if you have a multi-year insurance, right? It's not if you're a one-off, whatever.
I'm not concerned about that. That's very solvable.
Yeah.
I do those deals all the time. I mean, you just get the certs again. I mean, But I understand the concern. I mean, everybody is saying we want to have insured events, certainly, and we just need to do that properly.
But you can't say that the city is sold out till 2026, right? You can't say that the city is sold out until 2026, and every one of those people have multi-year insurance, when they sign the contract. No, they have to make sure that the insurance is valid when the year. There's a trigger there that said when they sign the contract, you see that it's expiring in May of 2025. You say, hey, your insurance on file is about to expire. Can you send us your thing? Because there are conferences that are booking book Nashville, for the next couple of years. And so I know it can be done. I mean, they have contracts with the convention center. They have contracts with other entities around the city. I know that there might not be necessarily like Fairgrounds, but they have to have some kind of mechanism to ensure that people, these hotels are sold out. So people have contracts with hotels. There's no guarantee that hotel going to be standing. An earthquake could happen, knock it down. But they have this contract. So, I think that things can be done. We just have to figure out a way to make sure that it's done and that it's still beneficial for us. At the end of the day, making sure that we have guaranteed income coming in.
Well, most beneficial for us is to get in alignment with what the market is telling us to do. What we're doing now at this low rate, we got to get past that.
Laura, what are you looking for as far as an action item out of this from us?
Nothing today. We wanted the opportunity for you to discuss. I wanted to hear back from you where maybe some pinch points are. And then we want to go back and work on, digest what we've heard today. So we did send a communication out to our clients that we were going to be having this discussion today. And we told them, that it would be posted. So we want them to hear it. We want them to see the report, see the presentation. We want to hear feedback from them, see if they have any questions, and then come back to you with staff recommendations and then any feedback that we get from our clients, plus what we heard from you today. Ideally, it'd be great if we could, have an action item next month at our February meeting, and that'll give us some time to, like I said, kind of digest what we heard today and see what we can come up with.
So you sent this out to all of our current clients, or?
Yes.
But none, and what about people before who haven't been with us in a year or two or something like that?
I did the most recent client list. It went to approximately 100 clients.
Laura, I might suggest, I don't know if we have any more time with Catherine on the fee study, but if we could get some examples, because I think Jasper and Diego kind of talked about a nonprofit fee schedule. I'm also very interested in that idea, and I'd love to see some examples, or you guys to think about what that could look like if we chose to do that.
There's even some benchmarks within Metro.
Great.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Municipal Auditorium has a nonprofit fee that is different from other. And another thing that I want to make sure to comment here officially, and one of the exercises that I participated inside Metro before, and it was a very similar situation when the plan for adjusting fees is to actually get to breaking even and to not be using that, what you're saying, like the stipend, right, that you call that. I think that a goal for us as a board should be then also understanding, and with your help, Laura, and say, well, what is the size of the benefit that we want to provide? And that in itself should be a budget item to ask the administration, council, et cetera, and say, our operation is sustainable, but we want to help Nashville. We want to give back to Nashville $1 million worth of subsidy and space for groups X, Y, and whatever, and then we say, well, we need to increase our budget to be able to take on that loss, right? And not always saying, well, we're going to be adjusting to get to break even, right? So I think there's a mechanism there that can make a lot of sense, and that way you have the people that are deciding how much should that benefit that comes out of this place should or would be to the public would be whoever is the mayor in turn and the council in turn, and they are the ones that should be deciding how tax dollars are spent and how they benefit the public. That way we don't act as pre-council decision, et cetera, right? So if our job is to run this asset as optimally as possible, but we are community conscious and we want to make sure that we provide it, then I think we can have great tools and a way of presenting this and say, well, our proposal is to get us to not being subsidizing this from the asset perspective per se. It should be part of the budget, right? So like if we grow the budget, then you're giving me that much more to do. It's a way, or if we use our profits to put into that plus what the city wants to give in addition to that and whatnot, right? Just to say that the benefit or the stipend or the subsidy should be a budget item itself and not should just be, well, any loss that we have, that's a subsidy that we're doing for the community, right? Because that's not necessarily also true.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
This study is great. It's very helpful. It's very easy to read. Great choice of consultant on this.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Okay, thank you very much. Are you done with me?
I think we are. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. You guys have a good
Thank you.
evening. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
So I guess that's the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn if there's no other discussion.
So moved.
I second, but
Third.
on the agenda, the year needs to change to 2024, especially if we publish it on the website too.
None of this counts now. We got to redo it.
Went back in time. All right. All in favor for adjourning? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. Unanimous. Thanks.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.